AM radio, an op-ed column, and Fox News is not enough. I want a center-right nation to fight for its soul, and its soul is represented in the arts. Its soul is represented in a world in which media is everything. AM radio is the lowest form of communication. It's tinny, it's not robust, it's not Avatar. I want Avatar. I want the right to enter the world of media to the extent and invest in media the way that the left does.
The fake media is trying to silence us, but we will not let them, because the people know the truth. The fake media tried to stop us from going to the White House, but I'm president and they're not.
You're listening to the Curt Schilling Podcast, a Breitbart.com podcast. The podcast starts now. Here's Curt with today's headlines.
Hey guys, welcome back to another edition of the Curt Schilling Podcast. Today, Breitbart's Charlie Spiering, our White House correspondent, is going to join us, as well as Francis Martel, our national security editor. Got a really nice lineup of sound bites today. As we get closer to the midterms, understanding just what the possibilities are if you don't go out and vote. This is the left and its all its splendor and glory. It's starting off with someone who I think committed a crime a couple months ago by negotiating on behalf of the United States without the ability to do so. He is one and only former Secretary of State John Kerry talking about someone else being unfit. Please listen to him on CNN's Fareed Zakaria GPS. Listen up.
You say that we are in a constitutional crisis because now the Woodward books, the New York Times op-ed make plain, in your view, I think that the president does not seem capable of the job. Is that a fair?
I think it's more than doesn't seem capable. I mean, we have had confirmed now for more than a year and a half examples, some by virtue of people who write a book and talk to a person like Woodward and tell them what they're seeing and observing. And Woodward is obviously a terrific reporter who knows how to gather his facts and protect his flanks. So his credibility is very, very high. And some of the evidence is come very directly from a president himself. For instance, when you tweet chastising an attorney general of the United States for following the law and doing what the Justice Department is supposed to do by holding Republican congressmen as accountable as anybody else and indicting them, and the president puts it in the context of affecting the elections, you have a president who clearly doesn't understand America, doesn't understand the Constitution, doesn't understand the role of the Justice Department, the separation of powers, and that's dangerous. And when you link it to his rush to a summit with Kim Jong-un, his pronouncements about nuclear weapons afterwards, the lack of any certainty or precision to what the accountability is for the weaponry that exists, let alone the denuclearization, we're working in a very, very different and frankly dangerous world for our country.
John Kerry just tried to tell you and I that the president doesn't understand America. And I would argue that of all the people involved in the conversation in this administration and the D.C. Beltway, he's the only person that understands America. It's the opposite. The left's opposite of truth is truth to them. And then you had Sunday on CNN's State of the Union. Kellyanne Conway was on with Jake Tapper, and I want you to listen to the back and forth and talk to me afterwards. Listen to who sounds rational and who sounds who sounds very leftish. Listen up.
Doesn't it bother you that there are senior administration officials that think it's their job to protect the president?
Yes, just as it bothers me that the same handful of sources feel like they need to sit down with every author and get their side of the story out. I guess they're too lazy to go write their own book, and who would believe them? But let me just say this.
But doesn't it say something about President Trump, that there are people around him that think this way?
I think it says something about them. This is what I ultimately want to say to you, too. I was really struck this week in denying the statements attributed to him in the Woodward book. Secretary Mattis, if you read his denial, it was remarkable what he denied, but it was really remarkable what he affirmed. He said not only would he never disparage the elected commander, he wouldn't tolerate it from anybody in the very big Department of Defense, but he also affirmed what's happening through Secretary Mattis and General Kelly and the President Trump agenda. He said the ISIS caliphate is all but disappearing, that defense policies are welcomed on Capitol Hill amiably, that we've had the first pay raise for our military in many years, something near and dear to your heart. And I do want to ask,
well, not the first. They've been going on.
First in a very long time.
I think it's
Jake, but as a
bigger pay raise.
As a responsible member of the media, I'd like to ask you on behalf of the White House, would you as CNN feel comfortable granting anonymity to somebody who may be level staffer? What would have been the comfortable criteria?
It's a totally good question. I don't know who.
Because I see people in the media very upset with this. They're saying if it's not somebody in the cabinet, if it's not a senior staffer, we're going to be very
I don't know who it
disappointed.
is. If it's somebody significant, then I think then printing it is responsible. If it's somebody completely irrelevant and powerless,
then why are we giving this person authority? This person obviously is motivated by conceit.
I can just tell you as an anchor that I gave the story more attention after Vice President Pence, Secretary Pompeo, and the entire cabinet came out and gave the op-ed credibility. It never even crossed my mind. I've told you this to you privately. It never even crossed my mind that it was Vice President Pence until Vice President Pence was out there saying it wasn't him. He and the administration gave this op-ed credibility.
No one gave it credibility. People just said that this person was someone who doesn't matter. But the left took that to believe that this is somebody high up. I mean, I think Jake Tapper had it in his mind that maybe this might have been Mike Pence. Kellyanne Conway was spot on. General Mattis's comments affirmed far more good than any bad. And to think that this is somebody high up, I think is, and I think someday we'll find out. And if I'm betting Vegas, I'm saying Omarosa, and I'm saying it's either one of two things. It's Omarosa or it's someone at the New York Times who wrote the piece themselves. Don't need to have any facts. You have an anonymous source. They've done it before. Why would they stop now? As we get closer to the midterms and as we get closer to the potential blue wave, isn't this what irrational people do? Isn't this what animals that are backed into corners? They lash out many times irrationally. And I think that's exactly what's happening and exactly how they're responding. I would tell you that it's going to be even worse if Ronna McDaniel is even close. She was on CBS Face the Nation. She's the RNC's chairwoman. If her predictions, and I believe them because I think Newt Gingrich was right a couple months ago when he said it, but if her predictions come true, as she said on Face the Nation, I think it'll be even worse. Listen up to what she's predicting.
Typically when we look at midterm races, the president's party often loses seats. I mean, you've got some exceptions, 98, 2002. Will Republicans be able to hold control of the House? How certain are you?
So first of all, we know the historical trends. 30 seats lost in that first midterm when you hold the White House. Obama lost 60 seats. And usually you lose seats in the Senate, too. So the Senate map, we are talking about picking up seats, which is unprecedented in a midterm of a first-term president. So that's something that everyone should be looking at. One, to any seat. If we pick up one seat, that will be defying history. On the House, we have a lot of seats in the margin. Absolutely, we've had an unprecedented amount of retirements, and that has made it harder in some of these swing districts. But right now, I say it's 50-50. We are out every day working. The RNC has raised to date $250 million. We've put 549 staff on the ground. We've trained 20,000 field organizers. That's 4 times more than we did in 2016. So our infrastructure to turn out our vote, engage with our voters, to talk to them about these results is the best it has ever been in the midterms. Now, candidates matter, and that's going to be different in every single race, and we need these candidates to talk about their local issues, go out there. They have to work as hard as they've ever worked. Candidates who think that they're in safe districts, they're going to have to give everything, and we're going to be there backing it up at the RNC.
So if you were to listen to the left, both in D.C. and in the media, you would have the impression that the country's falling apart, that the support for this president is through the floor, when in fact, you just heard from Ronna McDaniel that the opposite is true. Over $250 million raised. The RNC establishment is growing from a volunteer's perspective, from a trained field operative's perspective. This would be unprecedented in epic fashion for a first-term president if they were to actually pick up seats. And let me just remind you of one very important number. 1,000 plus. That is the number of elected officials and seats that were lost during the 8 years of the Obama administration, over 1,000 local and federal positions. And there's a reason for that. And then you have Democrats doing what they do, which is say things that make you sit back and go, what? On Sunday's Meet the Press, NBC's Meet the Press, Senator Dick Durbin spouted a line we've heard from everybody in the Obama administration, and they continue to say this, and I'm getting to the point where I think they actually honestly believe it, even though we know it's the opposite of truth. Listen to what he says about Barack Obama's 8 years in office.
We're talking about consistent reporting over and over again about unpredictable, unprepared, unstable behavior by this president. In a matter of great national security and defense, can we trust this president to make the proper decision, to make a thoughtful decision? These are things that I think should be addressed by his own party, but instead we hear the silence of the lambs that are basically quiet, have nothing to say when it comes to these events, except for a few. Bob Corker's one of them, who stepped up and said a few things.
What concerns you more, that there's an unelected cabal or the reports that come out from these anonymous sources? I mean, doesn't the president deserve to have a staff that doesn't not just disparage him this way at times, but stops him from actually doing the job that he believes he was elected to do?
Well, of course, but you have to ask yourself what kind of circumstances in the White House would even give rise to this possibility. Under President Obama, 8 years without an indictment, 8 years without a major scandal. You know, they had their problems, every presidency does, but nothing that went to the heart of the question about whether we have a dysfunctional White House. And if we do, it's inescapable that the president bears responsibility. He's the one who gathered this team. He's the one who tries to keep them together. And yet there is genuine fear, obviously, among some of them, that his behavior is going to result in some terrible things for America.
Did you notice how he phrased the 8 years without a major scandal? He prefaced it by saying 8 years without an indictment. He said 8 years without an indictment, 8 years without a major scandal. Those mean the same thing to the Democrats. If you weren't indicted, you didn't have a scandal. I mean, is that the bar now for the White House? If you can go your entire term without being indicted, you're a great president. If you can go 2 terms without being indicted, you're amazing. A major scandal apparently has to do with being indicted. That was a Freudian slip that wasn't lost on me. And then finally, I saved this the best for last. Anybody that is following Hollywood, or to some degree or another, has watched the complete shit show that is Jim Carrey. He's gone from somebody who I thought was one of the most talented actors I've ever seen to someone who is clearly has and has had severe mental issues. But he was on TV with another guy who I think is one of the biggest front holes to ever live. On Real Time with Bill Maher on HBO, Bill Maher and Jim Carrey. I'm going to let you listen to it, and then the last half of the soundbite is truly amazing. Listen up.
The Democrats seem to be getting their groove back a little bit, and what I mean by that is that Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, Ayanna Pressley, Stacey Abrams, Kerry Evelyn Davis, these are all women who won in primaries, weren't supposed to. And they did it with unabashed liberal proposals: Medicare for all, ending student debt, a different approach to the war on terror, ending mass incarceration. It seems like if there is maybe a shining spot in this Trump tragedy, it's that it's made the Democrats sort of rediscover who they are. Mm-hmm. And the voters... Is that what's going on?
Look, I think those fundamental issues, health care, job security, and all of the things that are being addressed, whatever form it takes, you're hearing this kind of across the board. Those candidates reflected their districts well. They reflect their constituencies well. Connor Lamb in your state probably has a slightly different slant on these things, but fundamentally the values, I think, are very consistent. And
so the Republicans are running with the word socialism. They're trying to say...
They're trying to scare people.
Scare people.
It's communism.
Venezuela, Trump says. We're going to be living in Venezuela.
I grew up in Canada, okay? We have socialized medicine. And I'm here to tell you that this bullshit line that you get on all of the political shows from people is that it's a failure. The system is a failure in Canada. It is not a failure in Canada. I never waited for anything in my life. I chose my own doctors. My mother never paid for a prescription. It was fantastic. And I just got back from Vancouver, and I keep hearing this, like, Canadians are so nice. Canadians are so nice. They can be nice because they have health care.
First of all, Jim Carrey, I know this might be a shock to you, but you've never waited for anything in Canada because you're Jim Carrey. That's how it works. And I know how that's how it works because I've seen it from that side. Jim Carrey has never waited for anything in his life because he's been catered to his whole life because he's a star. All right, that's first and foremost. But the fact of the matter is that socialism hasn't worked anywhere ever, and it doesn't scale. All these people pointing to the Swedens of the world and the Nordic countries of the world fail to listen to and talk to the people that live there. Those are cradle to the grave socialist states. And the fact of the matter is, socialism is something Jim Carrey wouldn't want socialism, because socialism, by their definition, would tax the hell out of him. He would have nothing more than his neighbor has, and everybody would be. It's just the stupidity and the ignorance of continuing to spout off the love of socialism. And I just keep saying, listen, Jim, if you love socialism so much, stay in Canada. Go ahead and stay in Canada. No one here is going to miss you. Nobody. And I want you to also think about something, guys. I want you to, if you get into a discussion, I want you to explain or ask a liberal or a progressive, what does mass incarceration mean to them? What does it mean when we talk about people being mass incarcerated? Because it's not the police going around and rounding up people of Japanese persuasion to put them in internment camps. That's what the Democratic elected president did, who was a Democrat in World War II. It's not about segregating schools or segregating different people in the populace based on color. That's what the Democrats did pre-civil rights. But what does mass incarceration actually mean? Just because a significant number of people of a certain persuasion are being jailed more than others would lead you to go to statistics and figure out why. And then when you go to the statistics, they explain why. A significantly larger portion of one community commits a larger portion of the crimes than others. That's not racist. That's just fact. But the left would have you believe we need to be a nation of fewer laws, unless it has to do with the Second Amendment. So I don't know. But I'm encouraged. They continue to talk, and their full-blown embrace of socialism hopefully is going to kick them in the ass in the midterms. Anyway, we're going to take a short break. We'll be back on the other side with Charlie Spiering. Back in just a minute.
Breitbart News Daily with Alex Marlow.
Why did we see some of the Republican kissing of Mark Zuckerberg that was taking place?
I called it kissing the ring because I felt like every single person practically had to kiss the ring of this guy, who wants to do nothing except get all those people out of office. So, bizarre behavior from the Republicans.
Breitbart News Daily, weekdays at 6 a.m. Eastern on SiriusXM Patriot 125.
You're listening to the Curt Schilling Podcast. Once again, here's Curt Schilling.
Joining me now this morning is someone who I've had a chance to get to know over the last couple of years, and who I guess would be on my laundry list of bucket list things. His job every day. He is White House Breitbart correspondent Charlie Spiering. Good morning, Charlie. How you doing?
Hey, Curt. Doing well.
Hey, listen. I wanted to ask you. The last soundbite I played before. I don't know if you heard it before you came on, but it was basically Jim Carrey on Bill Maher's show, and they're talking about socialism, and they're talking about its awesomeness, and they're talking about, apparently her name is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, according to Bill Maher. But anyway, the left is, and many of them, much to their credit, I guess, have gone out and embraced fully blown embrace of socialism. And I'm wondering, when you sit in the White House press corps, and I would be curious to know about the members in the press corps. There's no way we're the only ones that see this. You guys all see it and hear about it. You know what they're talking about. You know what these people are endorsing. And those are, if you're an anti-Trumper, that's what the side that you're on. And I'm wondering if the members of the media acknowledge this to you, or do they seem to be, fully backing this? Listen, there's anti-Trump, and then there's socialism. Those two aren't, mutually exclusive. But how is the media itself, the members of the media, are they actually sticking up for this thing, or is it just all, I hate Trump?
Well, I think you'll hear a lot of the media express some skepticism when it comes in, and this is when they sort of slip into horse race mode, right? This is when they're just like, well, how can Democrats expect to win when they proclaim themselves as open socialists? And I think you will see a little bit of skepticism trickle out, and the conventional wisdom that sometimes builds up in Washington is sometimes, hasn't handled the Trump administration very well, but in as far as Democrats embracing socialism, I think that that rests squarely in that would be a bad idea if you're trying to win elections.
So another bad idea, if you're trying to win elections, is having the media point out that this is, according to the New York Times, the best economy in quite a long time, which is the headline on Breitbart today, guys. And the Washington Post talking about Trump's economy boosting blue-collar jobs, the middle class. Basically, he's doing exactly what he said he would do, which is lift the middle class out of the crap and morass that the left has continued to pile onto them, which is, Medicare, health care for all, and this ridiculous taxation philosophy that somehow they believe higher taxes leads to a prospering middle class, which I don't get. But right now, as we watch the hearings, the confirmation hearings, any takeaways from the left? I mean, I don't even know how you ask the president about this, because I know how he is, and I can just see him pontificating on how and he'd be right. Just the ridiculous hoax and just, I don't know, the farce that we're watching as it relates to Justice Kavanaugh.
That's what's fascinating about the president, is that you don't really have to be behind the scenes to get what he really thinks about a certain topic, because he's usually telling you every single day what he really thinks. And we definitely saw him during his rallies last week, his political rallies, talking about how the Democrats were just desperate. They were just looking desperate, mean, ridiculous, just trying, it's so obvious. And he said the same. It's so obvious that they're just trying to do this all for political points, but they're just coming off as nasty and mean and spiteful, especially in the wake of, Kavanaugh's response, and someone who really demonstrated, as Trump put it, his great legal mind. And I think that was definitely on display. And the contrast between Kavanaugh and the Democrats was very clear. And I don't think the president is concerned about, his nominee. I think he's very proud of what he's seen on TV.
Well, and I got to tell you, it seems to me that a lot of what the Democrats are doing is trying to take up airtime, because the more he talks, the stupider they look. And Cory Booker, I mean, that was it turns out to be a total joke. He tried to make himself look like, some sort of martyr, and lying about the sequence of events leading up to his releasing of documents that weren't supposed to be released. And when has
Curt, I just can't get over that.
It feels like breaking.
When you're having an I am Spartacus moment, you don't tell the cameras that you're having an I am Spartacus moment. You let the truth stand up.
Thank you.
Let the people decide for themselves when they're having a Spartacus. It's just so manufactured and so fake. And the people are smart enough now to understand that, that so many of these Democrats and so many of these senators are making these fake moments for political attention. And, thankfully, this is sort of what the Trump administration is. Trump is real. He comes off as real, and his critics will say what they may, but he's certainly not going off telling people when he's going to do something controversial. He just does it.
Yeah. Well, and I keep going back to this. I mean, if you remember, one of the biggest outcries prior to the 2016 general election was we wanted an outsider, and the left to some degree said it as well. I keep trying to tell people for the last 2 years, this is what an outsider looks like. I mean, this is an outsider who he's not a polished politician. He never will be, thank God. But the things that he says, and he's real for better or worse. That's the other thing is there are so many things he does that I wish I just looked and go, oh, come on, really? But at the same time, and I'm sure there are people in the press room who do the same thing. But at the same time, I don't, you don't get the whole of him if you don't get the bad parts too, and you have to take those and accept those. And I do want to ask you, so the op-ed that came out in the New York Times, I'm curious to know. First of all, I don't doubt for a second, in my opinion, that Omarosa had something to do with it. In my opinion, that's completely me. But she's trying to make us believe with some of her comments that she was part of some in White House clique that was, conspiring against the president. I can't imagine anybody on the planet that would trust this woman, much less include her in a clique.
Yeah, it's pretty clear that what Omarosa is doing, she had her 5 minutes of fame, and she's really trying to cling on to any sort of scandal and try to add more details. Well, she's run out. Maybe she has more tapes. I don't know if any of them have anything interesting on them, but she's really sort of pulled all. It seems to me anyway that she's pulled all of her, anything good out already. She's already sort of told her story and used whatever she could to prop it up. And I think she's out of tricks. I think at this point you have this official that's just trying to cling on to every single scandal and try to pretend to use your position of former glory to latch on and to really sort of stretch it out as long as possible. If anyone knows how to do it, it's Omarosa, because she's very versed in the reality TV world and how to keep things going. So we'll see. I don't know. I don't think anything will rise back up to the level of where, people are thinking she has anything more to say about the Trump administration. She's made it very clear where she stands.
And, the only thing that does is I think it further illegitimizes who she is with normal Americans, but it makes her more of a guest in demand for the left. And it's just exposing things that I never thought the fact that we're seeing the left highly engaged in promoting socialist candidates openly is very telling. I don't think it's a good thing, but I think it's very telling about where this country is. I think we're in a position that we've never been in, and I don't think it's necessarily a good thing, because I do still feel like we're sitting on a powder keg.
Yeah, what you see is just this growing acceptance of sort of the Hollywood culture and the Hollywood media political elite and this culture that don't represent the rest of America. And Jim Carrey could not make it more clear that he's coming from a very highly socialist climate of Hollywood, and this is the beliefs of a few. This is not the beliefs of the many in the United States who wake up every morning and go do their jobs and live out sort of the American dream every day. And that American dream is not a result of socialism; it's a result of their own free actions in a free economy.
Yeah. No, it's incredibly frustrating to know that Donald Trump is doing what he's doing, and things are happening, and things are working, and the country's in a great place. Yet you would not know anybody in the media believes it as such, except for maybe Matt Drudge and those of us at Breitbart. But the fact of the matter is, the middle class.
As you mentioned earlier in the show, the New York Times, the Washington Post, they can't ignore it. They are writing stories about how the economy under Trump's watch is doing great. And make no mistake, there's a reason why President Obama broke his silence last week, and you could tell in his speech that this was not just simply, a campaign speech in favor of Democrats, which is what it was supposed to do. This was a very angry, bitter president who was really upset with Trump getting the credit for the booming economy, and he desperately wants more credit. And Trump is just way better at selling it. And
that's where
it's impossible to argue with.
Well, it's also his legacy is gone. Anything he had as a legacy is gone. So now I think he's trying to make that his legacy. He's trying to make the booming economy his fault, I guess is the way to put it. And it's mind-boggling to me that anybody would even think to support that viewpoint, especially given, what the statistical facts are during his administration. I mean, the GDP, the numbers are factual, and so are the unemployment. 13 million more people on food stamps than when he took office, and a record number of people not looking for work, as opposed to now there are a record number of people employed. There are it's mind-boggling to me how little facts matter to the left's argument, which would be fine, Charlie, if it was just the people. But it's not. The media is continuing to back up the message and support the message, and that's probably, I think, the most dangerous part.
Yeah, when you get so many of these, former Obama officials in the media, complaining that, President Obama doesn't get enough credit, they just forget about the way things were under Obama, and he had 8 years to get things done. Well, he managed to spend a lot of money and mess up a lot of people's health care, but for the president,
they have to forget, because I was going to say they have to forget simply because that's the only way you can stand up in public and say something as stupid as it was a scandal-free administration. There's just no way you can do that with a straight face if you're remembering exactly what happened. They had more scandals in the administration than any president of my lifetime, and that's including a Clinton.
Yeah, it's amusing to see the president, or the former president Barack Obama, to come out and sort of resurface all of those, the ugly parts of his administration that most people are willing to just let him go right off into the sunset. But if he wants to relitigate his administration, I think there's a lot of people who would be perfectly happy to compare the two presidents and send him back into history for a little while, because he had his moment, and it's time for him to decrease.
Yeah, no, it's telling. It's a trying time, and you got another busy week ahead of you, Charlie. So thank you for taking the time, and I appreciate you coming on, and look forward to catching up.
You bet, Kurt. Anytime.
Breitbart News Tonight with Joel Pollack and Rebecca Mansour.
The real thing that the left is angry about is they're like, how could you allow these Russian memes? Somebody saw a meme and then they decided they had to vote for Trump. Or it must have been fake news. And by fake news, they mean conservative websites. Come on. But this is what the left thinks. Fake news. And by fake news, what they mean is shut down Breitbart.
Breitbart News Tonight. Weeknights starting at 9 p.m. East on Sirius XM Patriot 125. We want to hear from you. Tweet the show at Garrick38. Once again, here's Curt Schilling.
Joining me now is the national security editor here at Breitbart, one Frances Martel. Good morning, Frances. How are you?
Good morning. Doing great.
Hey, there's a story on Breitbart I want to ask you about, given your deep understanding of the Middle East. Breitbart Jerusalem Desk has this story out. The headline is, Iran sends, quote, unquote, all Jews Rosh Hashanah wishes for peace and harmony. The Times of Israel reports that despite a year that saw Israeli and Iranian forces fighting, directly clashing, Tehran's foreign minister on Sunday sent all Jews a Rosh Hashanah greeting, wishing them a year of peace and harmony. Please, I'm not even sure where to start with that one.
Well, I mean, this is pretty basic two-faced diplomacy from Iran here. I mean, I think the foreign minister sends out warm greetings. I mean, even President Rouhani has said kind things about Israel in speeches. And meanwhile, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, who are the people who actually run the country, are using advanced weapons as a warning to Israel. I mean, the other big headline this weekend out of Iran is that Iran decided to bomb Kurdish targets in Iraq using pretty significantly advanced targeted bombs, which are being interpreted as a message to Israel, not just a message to the Kurds and a message to Iraq that we can bomb Iraq whenever we want without telling Baghdad, but also that we have sophisticated weapons and we probably sold them to Hezbollah. So, it's have a happy and peaceful upcoming new year, but also we're probably going to bomb you if we get a chance. It's quite a message.
Well, it feels almost. It feels like, in some sort of tragic way, Bill Clinton sending Monica Lewinsky a Christmas card. I mean, this is just this is on its face and and behind the scenes one of the most see-through. I mean, they have mullahs weekly calling for the destruction of all Jews, not just Israel, but all Jews, and I don't understand how. I mean, I guess I would ask you: is the worldwide belief that the common man is that stupid? Is it that prevalent? Do people in power really believe? And I can only assume in China and the Middle East that that's the case. But these people act as if they're talking to a very dumbed down person or people or world. This would be the equivalent, honest to God, of Franklin Delano Roosevelt sending the Third Reich a get well card or a message. I mean, they want Jews gone, and I don't understand how something like this can even make. Why would this even be something that they would attempt to do when everything else they do is sternly against the Jew as a whole?
Well, yeah, and stupid has nothing to do with it here. They are talking to a very diluted audience, but they're not talking to the common man anywhere in the world. They're talking to the people that they want to do business and sell oil to, namely the EU. I think the EU has a lot to gain from doing business and buying Iranian oil. They desperately want to do it, at least the elites in the EU, not the European people. And they have been pressuring Iran to be like, hey, tone it down, because we can't justify doing business with you if you're out there, talking about using like Holocaust rhetoric. We just can't do it. Our reputation will not survive that. So moderate yourself a little bit and we'll use that. So when the UN General Assembly happens in next week or the week after, European leaders that decide to ignore American sanctions on Iranian oil can say, well, look, they're nice now. They said, happy Rosh Hashanah, Shana Tova. Like they can actually use this as a very transparent excuse to say, well, we're benefiting a lot from this and we don't really care where the money goes to. We don't care that it's funding terrorism because it's also funding our mansions. But if you're going to question us, look at what the friendly rhetoric that's coming out of Tehran. And obviously that's not going to work for the average person. But this is kind of how diplomacy works. And it also, to be honest, works with a lot of elites on the left who are stupid enough to buy this. I mean, have we already forgotten the Obama administration just handing crates of cash to Iran because they actually moderated themselves this time? People like Ben Rhodes, who's a lifetime novelist, knows nothing about politics, is enamored with this sort of rhetoric. So there are people stupid enough to believe it. Unfortunately, they're not the common man. They're the people running a lot of institutions on the left.
Speaking of stupid enough to believe it, a topic that I have leaned on you for knowledge in the past year, if not 2 years, that is continuing to get pushed as far back from page one as it can be in every news source, is the flagship poster child for socialism, Venezuela. The tragedy that's going on down there has not abated. It's gotten worse, and the news coverage has gotten less. And I think those things have very much to do with each other, because you have seen an open flouting of a love for socialism from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to Bill Maher to Jim Carrey. Jim Carrey basically said on the Bill – well, he didn't basically. He actually said on the Bill Maher show, he said, stop tormenting, demonizing socialism, stop apologizing for it, and embrace it and accept it. And I mean, in the immortal words of Will Ferrell, that just happened. I mean, how is that possible?
Well, I mean, Jim Carrey's not exactly an enlightened political mind. He's certainly more capable politically than Ben Rhodes, who we were just talking about. But this happens because there are people, and this is very frustrating to me as someone who's been interested in and studying politics for most of my life. There are people who spend their lives doing something else, like living in Hollywood, being surrounded by leftists, having never read a book on socialism, and then they decide that they're the experts because their ego has been inflated by celebrity, and they decide that they're going to spread this. And of course, the delusion is very easy to keep up when you live in Hollywood, because who's going to challenge you there? Which of your friends at the cocktail party is going to bring up what's happening in Venezuela? No, but nobody wants to do that. So that's how things like that happen. And then to go to your earlier point on what's going on in Venezuela, not only are they not talking about it, if you read the New York Times story this weekend on the Trump administration meeting with Venezuelan military leaders, it was written in a way to somehow disparage the Trump administration for actually listening to the concerns of people in the Venezuelan military who understand that the country is sinking and something has to be done. Ultimately, the Venezuelan military officers that met with Trump wanted help for a coup, and the Trump administration said, we have no interest in a military option right now. That's crazy. We're not going to do it. But the way the article was written, and remember, this is the New York Times. The New York Times fabricated fake news in the 1960s about Fidel Castro to promote the revolution. They made up stories, just totally made up out of thin air. They did the same thing with the Soviet Union. They denied famines. So this is not a reputable news source, but in any case, they wrote this story up essentially saying the United States has a horrible reputation in Latin America for coups, and now Trump is trying to incite a coup. And that's absolutely not what the facts of the story state. So not only are they ignoring it, they're just making stuff up to make Venezuela look good, because that's how deep they are in defending this stuff.
Yeah. No, it's gone so far off the rails that I wonder. I don't know how we get back. Because I grew up in a time. I grew up, I think, at the time when the left and the right were moderate for the most part, and there was always common ground and middle ground, and we're at a point now where there is no longer a middle ground. I mean, you have Cory Booker basically playing Spartacus and then announcing while he's playing Spartacus that he is being Spartacus, and it turns out that the entire event was a hoax and a setup, and he is now being invited to any and every single left-leaning event in existence because he's apparently a star. You have Omarosa, who is, listen, I don't know how you feel about this, but I said it earlier to Charlie. Omarosa is trying to tell us that she was in a clique in the White House that was anti-Trump. I can't imagine any clique on the planet inviting Omarosa in, number one, because she's the most untrustworthy human being next to President Obama that I've ever, or Hillary Clinton I've ever heard. But number two, that she would lead some movement is even more hilarious to me.
Yeah, well, Omarosa's a pro wrestling figure. Everything that she exists for entertainment value, and everything that she says and does is for entertainment.
You just hit it. I have not heard a better analogy ever of Omarosa. She is a pro wrestling entertainment figure. That is absolutely perfect. That's exactly what she is. I'm going to write that down.
Yeah, and I watched a lot of Celebrity Apprentice. It's a fun show, but I would never take any of these characters and take them seriously on politics. That's where the danger lies. If you want to read the book and have a laugh, go for it, but don't pretend that this has anything to do with the reality of the way that our country is run.
Well, I got to tell you, I blame President Trump 100% for that. He knew what he was getting when he hired her, and for anybody to act surprised that she was exactly who he thought she was. This is the frog and the scorpion story all over again. Acting surprised when the scorpion stings you is your fault, not his. And
Exactly.
I mean, that's who she is. Hey, listen, I want to ask you, what's the latest on North Korea? We're getting some, I don't want to say subliminal message, but I'm hearing some undercurrent that things are not all as they appear to be.
Well, no, we had the anniversary of the founding of North Korea parade on Sunday, and North Korea did not display any intercontinental ballistic missiles, any nuclear technology whatsoever. So a lot of people who want to see the good in North Korea are saying that this is a sign that Kim Jong-un is ready to play ball with the United States. On the other hand, sitting right next to Kim Jong-un is the special representative that Xi Jinping sent to North Korea, representing China, who sent a personal letter from Xi to Kim Jong-un. China was front and center, which if I was North Korean and I believed in North Korea as a state and was a patriot, I would be very insulted, because you don't have a 4th of July parade and then have the British have a special envoy from England sitting right next to the president and getting better billing than the North Korean war veterans. But that's exactly what happened at the parade. So that, coupled with reports that China is flagrantly violating sanctions, that North Korea is still amassing nuclear material. They might not be building a bomb yet, but they are amassing plutonium and uranium, according to some reports. So they're saying one thing and doing another, and it's an interesting Rorschach test of who wants to believe what is said and who wants to believe what is done, and it depends on how much of an optimist you are, what side you pick. Trump seems to be picking the what you say side. He's been tweeting favorably about Kim for a while, but we also don't know what Trump's doing behind the scenes. And I know John Bolton has a public event today, so I'm very curious to see what he says, because he's the guy that usually brings everybody back to reality. So we'll see if he says anything about North Korea that differs from what Trump has to say.
Hey, Francis, it's always a pleasure, darling. Thank you, and look forward to catching up again.
Thanks so much for having me.
I don't know if I want to call it an epiphany, but the NFL kicked off this weekend, and with it began another year of discussions. The ratings are down again, great on that, and all the things that go with that, and blah, blah, blah. But I started to think about this, and I'm going to actually try and write something up for my blog. But I think, at least for me, I figured out why people kneel, why they're kneeling. And what they're kneeling for or what they're not kneeling for. And here's the thing. The colors of the flag. Red stands for courage, hardiness, and bloodshed. Courage because our country is based on the courage of separating from what we once knew. Courage of starting over, courage of fighting for our freedom. Hardiness because our founding fathers believed our country will outlast the land that we came from. Finally, bloodshed to honor all those who lost their life for our freedom and country. White stands for purity and vigilance. Purity because our country is independent and is not corrupted by any other country. Vigilance because our country needs to be alert and careful in the choices that we make. Blue stands for justice and perseverance. Justice because it is the basis of our country, and perseverance because although our nation is young, we will stand strong against all opposition. Hey, and another thing, whenever the flag is folded, there's a symbol behind each fold and tuck. It's not random. It's very purposeful, and there's a reason why they will fold in a flag at the American veteran's funeral. Fold 1 is a symbol for life. Fold 2 is a symbol of belief in eternal life. 3 is honor and remembrance of veterans. 4 is symbol of our weaker nature. 5 is tribute to the United States of America. 6 is symbol of our hearts in devotion. 7 is tribute to the armed forces. 8 is for those who went into the valley of the shadow of death. 9 is a tribute to womanhood and its giving and nurturing nature. 10 is a tribute to our fathers who gave their sons to protect our land. 11 is dedication to Jews and represents the bottom of the seal of King David and King Solomon. And 12 represents the Christian and glorifies God. There's a lot more to it. But it dawns on me that the reason these people kneel is because at the end of the day, they don't believe or stand for any of those things. They don't stand for the red, white, or blue. They don't stand for the fold or the stars. They kneel for themselves. They don't care that people have come before them. They don't care that people have shed blood before them. They don't care that people have had the things that this country went through to become who it is, to become who we are. They don't care about any of that. So when you don't care about the things that make something what it is, when you don't care about the founding reasons of why we are who we are, when you don't care about the history of the nation, then you don't care about the flag. You don't care about the folds in the flag and what they represent. You don't care about the colors and what they represent. You don't care about the stars and what they represent. And here's the thing. That same flag afforded you the right to not care about those things and still live here. Because when all is said and done, the kneel that Colin Kaepernick did to start this, the kneel was for a lie. The kneel was for this narrative that there is a disproportionate level of violence to young black men as there is to white men, which is statistically just not true. It's a lie. It never has been. It hasn't been true in our lifetime. And that was proven afterwards. The hands up, don't shoot lie was proven to be a complete farce. Those things started a movement in a big, big way. But I just told you the things behind the flag. And again, there are more. And it's just, the left doesn't believe in that because all of those things make us a nation of laws. And the left would have you believe that laws are racist by nature. Because, and here's the thing, to think about living under the 50 stars and stripes, or the 50 stars and the stars and stripes, is that not, after you've just heard all of those things that the flag represents, is that not something to be incredibly proud of? All of those things make me proud to be an American, but you listen to the left and they hate America and what it stands for. And that's why they kneel. They don't like us. And by us, I mean the common man, because I don't care what I did for a living. I'm a common man now. And I always have been, honestly. But the fact of the matter is they don't believe. And that's okay. I just wish they'd admit to who they are. So, anyway, there is a website called OWLCATION, alcation.com, and there is look up what does the American flag mean, and check out this website. There's a little history there, and it's something to teach your kids what the flag means, and especially the folds in the flag, because the folds in the flag are the most inclusive things you can imagine. They are a tribute to women, they are a tribute to fathers, they are a tribute to the Jews of the world, and they are a tribute to the Christians of the world. Those are what the 9, 10, 11, and 12 folds represent. Anyway, I just I want to write up something about that and put it on my blog, because I think that is for me, it was, again, like I said, an epiphany. So anyway, guys, have a wonderful day. God bless. Take care. Talk soon.
Sonny's Corner with Sonny Johnson.
Everything in hip-hop is not bad. Kanye agreed with us, so let's love him today until he raps tomorrow and you turn your back. Because if you jump off when the fun of the moment is over, then you are in fact making Kanye the token he is accused of being. So please, don't do that. Don't go there.
Sonny's Corner with Sonny Johnson. Saturday from 1 to 3 p.m. East on Sirius XM Patriot 125.